Welcome to Facing the Moment, brought to you by the Foundation for Self-Leadership. In these episodes, we will address various crises and focus on how to navigate them with abundant fortitude and a bit of hope. As we discuss relevant observations together, we will identify meaningful actions that will generate valuable insights. You can download all episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
I welcome our listeners to this episode. In this episode, we will look at family dynamics. When cultural norms or religious beliefs or even political differences might get in the way of individual choice and might threaten to tear the fabric that keeps a family whole. What does it take to reestablish connection? When is it desirable or possible to do so? Families are ideally a source of love and shelter, strength and belonging. There are instances, however, when family does no longer feel like a safe home to return to, or a home that welcomes us back. The door is shut and locked. How do we navigate that? If caught in such an unfortunate scenario, how might we stay deeply rooted in our own truth when that truth and even us who hold it are under attack? And how might we at the same time keep that fraying line that used to bind us from shredding? To help me delve deep into these questions, I'm pleased to be joined by Mona Sullivan for today's conversation. Mona, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Tawfiq.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being with us. Mona is a highly educated and accomplished woman who currently lives in the southeast of the U.S. She has taught high school for 18 years across several states and has served as an educational consultant for school districts and state departments of education. And she has received numerous awards and accolades for her contributions. Her focus is on helping transform school environments where authentic leadership empowers meaningful engagement by staff and teachers that empower learning. She is a cognitive coach who is IFS trained. Mona was also selected for and completed the foundation-sponsored IFS Leadership Fellows Program a few years ago, and we were honored that she was. Most relevant to our conversation today, though, is that Mona, who is of Arab-Egyptian descent, was raised in a Muslim family whose religious expectations have led to estrangement and pain. My guest will share with us how she navigated that situation and found a path to healing, a path to inner reconciliation for her and others along the way. What else might you want to add about you, Mona, that would be relevant to our conversation today?
Well, thank you for all those nice things that you said. I think I'd be remiss to leave out that I'm a mother of two pretty incredible kids. I have a 15-year-old son, and I have a 12-year-old daughter. And I'm a pretty happily married person, and I haven't always been, but I am now. So on a personal note, outside of the professional, and I would say I identify as a healer who's still healing. And that part of what I think contributes to my taking that role as a healer is that I'm very transparent about my own healing journey.
Thank you. Thank you first for the courage you bring with you today to share with us your own personal story, your healing journey, what you learned about it, how you put it in perspective, how you navigated the difficult moments. So I want to just tell my listeners that they may be triggers. It might bring to their minds and hearts difficult stories that they have themselves experienced. And if so, please take a moment, pause, leave, come back to this conversation when you're ready and available. So, Mona, I'd like to know from you what it meant for you to grow up in a household that followed Muslim teachings and traditions.
It's a great question. I never knew anything else as far as my personal life. That was our normal. although we were born, my brother and I, in New Jersey, and we were raised in Arizona, a lot of the people around us were mostly non-Muslims. So there was a bit of a trying to understand, how do I fit in? And I think belonging became central to my curiosity. Like, what does it take to belong in this family? How do I belong in this outer world? How do I reconcile these two identities? At the time, I only was really looking at the duplexity of my identity. I didn't realize how many more parts I had. And my father and mother really raised us to, their mantra was, we're going to take the best of both worlds. And so I was raised in a home where my father enjoyed leading dinner time discussions that were about a lot of different topics, but a lot of them were about interfaith topics. And I remember he always had a Torah and a Bible and a Quran and the Book of Mormon and like all these different religious texts on the bookshelf. And he used to tell us Islamic teachings through the lens of, let's understand them through comparison and contrast. He used to tell us that we would have a lot of people proselytizing to us in our life living in a Christian-dominated country, and that it would be helpful for us to know how to speak about what we were taught through the lens of comparison and contrast, which really has served me well in my life, to be honest.
Well, that's a beautiful setting. I'm just imagining these dinner conversations and just looking at a bookshelf with all these books that represent spiritual and religious teachings over the centuries, have them all right next to each other, coexisting, and reminding you that there are different ways to look at the world, different ways to look at ourselves. So I want to hear more about that. So maybe tell me next what resonated with you and helped you feel anchored in your family and within yourself. And was there anything that felt challenging for you in that period?
I think I can't recall feeling anchored in childhood, to be honest. I think a lot of our upbringing was, because it was through comparison and contrast, it was also egoic. I was thinking about an Eckhart Tolle quote in his book, A New Earth, and how he talks about, the ego is present when you compare something and you think you're better or worse. And I think, yes, there was coexisting like as a theme, but it was also, this is why our religion is superior. And I think that superiority has just never been part of my anchor. I think as I started to come into my own sense of truth around faith and religion, it was so hard as a little girl to see some of my best friends and think they're going to go to hell. And that somehow I was part of a chosen group that was not, and they were. And when I would think about people that I had looked up to with such high morals, like Mother Teresa, like Gandhi, like Martin Luther King Jr., and to think all these people were going to be going to hell because they weren't like in my club, they weren't a Muslim like me, I just could never get on board with that. But that was my parents' belief, and that was what I was being raised. I couldn't really reconcile it. And so that it was hard to, I think I was starting to be anchored in my own thoughts, probably around the age of 15, which when I was a teacher, I really loved teaching. I would taught sophomores for most of my career. That was probably the first time I really felt like confident enough to start challenging and questioning what I had been taught. And so if there is an anchor, the anchor was curiosity, Tawfiq. Really, I think I have led a life full of questions, full of curiosities, and constantly satiating, like looking to satiate that curiosity through more questions.
Yes, which is never actually, it's insatiable, as they say, right? So,
yeah.
Given your father's belief or your perception of his beliefs about, the Islamic tradition being superior, let's say. How did that filter into your family culture and rules, the home rules? And how, under these rules, did you and your brother and other members of the household engage with one another? How about your liberties and boundaries? How did you navigate all that? If you can share a little bit to give us even deeper context.
My father's a bit of a rebel, so he didn't really follow the 5 pillars to the letter of Islam. So I remember it was a lot of do as I say, not as I do. I remember my brother challenging him around, you're not praying 5 times a day. Why are you trying to ask us to pray 5 times a day? We did fast, pay zakat or tithe. I think we would do those things, but I think so much of it was dogmatic in that we were supposed to be following rules. My mom was very rigid in following the rules. My mom did pray 5 times a day, read a lot of Quran, played a lot of Quran. And when I think about it, I think there's like this entanglement between religion and culture that I didn't quite understand at a young age. I didn't understand. I think my cultural identity was so infused with my religious one that I think my brother and I sort of responded in 2 different ways. I think he just sort of rebelled against it because our parents raised us in a home that had quite a lot of dysfunction, had a lot of unhealthy behaviors. There was a lot of abuse. We witnessed our father abuse our mother. Our mother was pretty abusive towards me. And so because we were witnessing all of that in our minds, as we're trying to sort it out, that is what I think, I'll speak for myself. I can't speak on behalf of my brother, but excuse me. I think it became like, oh, so that's what Islam is. When you're trying to understand it, you don't have a whole lot of other role models around. We weren't really friends with a whole lot of Muslim families. We had a handful. It was hard to know what is dogma, what is doctrine, what is from the religion, what does it say in the text, and what is human error, what is just what I've come to understand my own father's hurt leading. And so when you don't have the tools or the language for that, you can become all or nothing and lump it all together and think, I don't need this religion if this is what this religion is.
Yeah, that's very helpful to understand. And I know we're going to get deeper into that tension that existed and maybe got worse over time. So given this dominance of these rules, as you call them, and witnessing the abuse, what emotions were predominant for you during that time? Were there recurring themes in your own personal story, your inner thoughts that may have defined that period for you? Might you share some of that to the extent you can recall them?
Yeah, I would say that I really suffered from a lot of depression at that time. I just felt so hopeless. I think there was these expectations that I must marry a Muslim man in order to be a good Muslim. And I kept thinking, where are they? Like, how am I going to find somebody like that would suit my parents' desires for me? That was a lot of maybe kind of college thinking. I did live at home with my parents through the end of my bachelor's degree. So I think I graduated at 22. So that was probably my later years in their home. The high school years, I think I felt a lot of shame. I was constantly faulted for just couldn't live up to the expectation. My mom had a lot of anxiety about me being too open. And so she did a lot of shaming around body shaming, around slut shaming, just that kind of stuff. And I think I felt a lot of abandonment, just constantly being estranged within the home, where my dad would go a couple days without speaking to me, or a week, or a few months when I was living at home. And then eventually when I finally moved out, it was on pretty terrible terms, and we were estranged the first time for 2.5 years during that first period of estrangement. So, I mean, I think there was a lot of just abandonment, of feelings of I'm not good enough, shame, with abandonment, which led to a lot of depression. I was on antidepressants for, probably from like the age of 19 for a good chunk of my young adulthood.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. I can imagine how these conditions would lead to that depression. And I'm just wondering if during that period you experienced any polarizing thoughts and tension within you, right? I will surrender. I won't surrender. I'll do this to honor my culture. I cannot let my culture dictate how to live my truth. There's often, from stories I read, a cost-benefit analysis that takes place, cognitively and somehow emotionally within the person. Have you experienced anything like that? And if so, might you elaborate?
Oh, sure. I mean, that really captures it. So much of that. I think there was a part of me that wanted to didn't want to be shamed, and thought the way to not be shamed was just to follow what they wanted me to do, which in my understanding of Allah at that time was also what God wanted me to do. And so in order to be good enough for my parents' love and the love of God, I should behave according to the rules of this religion. And then there was another part of me that was like, this can't possibly be healthy. If this is what this religion is, I'd rather not be a part of it. I don't see joy and I don't see happiness here. I see a lot of hurt, and that's not the life I want for me. And I think that's where a lot of the inquiry came from, is there was a lot of polarized parts or polarized thoughts, but I kept being called back to, well, let me become a seeker of the truth. Let me become a seeker of what is my reality, not as what it's being shared with me as the reality.
It takes deep wisdom to get to that point, to be able to almost elevate beyond the situation and know your own truth and seek to live it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is. I definitely believe there's something intuitive, but I also deeply believe in the power of mental health supports. And I think my first therapist was when I was 19, still in college, and he was a Jewish American. And for him to be the person that supported me through my understanding of what was happening was so unclear. And so you start developing the questions, but there's all this shame that comes for not knowing the answers, or there's two truths and you're polarized and you don't have the clarity yet. So you need that support of another really good questioner, a therapist, helping you to kind of mitigate, and they're mediating you with wrestling with your thoughts. And I think it's one of the foundations for why I love coaching so much, helping people sort through it with some questions,
Well, beautifully said. You talked about curiosity, and that's one aspect of curiosity, asking questions and being open to the answers, right? Instead of knowing the answer and trying to fit everything to that answer. Because you talked about two truths, and no truth is absolute. And if that's the case, maybe those two truths could coexist in some fashion. Maybe elements of them are completely diagonally opposed to one another, but on the whole, these two truths could somehow fit within each other if we're able to ask the right questions and understand them better and reveal them
Yeah.
a bit more openly.
Yeah, and I think part of it was not understanding that one of my truths was this shame. Like I am fundamentally flawed. I am bad for even considering this other pursuit of happiness in this other way. That doesn't come through these dogmatic practices of a dean, of a religion, but that would come through some other ways. Well, that's just presented as sinful and bad and wrong and faulty. And that's hard to navigate when I didn't really have a spiritual leader, because I didn't feel like I could go talk to a spiritual leader without shaming the family, for having whatever thoughts I was having about romantically getting involved with somebody from another faith, or just all of my sinful thoughts that were not in alignment with Islamic principles. That's what I was kind of experiencing as one of the dichotomies. And then the other one is like, it took me a long time to get to the other one, that maybe I'm not, maybe it's okay. Maybe I'm just designed the way I'm supposed to be designed.
Sure.
Maybe I am good enough.
Yeah, well, I think you are. Clearly, each of us is more than good enough, but it's these experiences that block our ability to see that and feel that and recognize that. So our self-worth gets buried, right, under the rubble of whatever experience we have. And it takes some external incentive or power, or some internal drive to rescue that, if you wish, from the rubble, and it's usually intact. It's one of those things that people can hopefully regain complete possession of, if that's the word to use.
Absolutely, Tawfiq. I love that. I think that's a beautiful metaphor for it. And at 47, I feel like I have a lot of clarity around that. But maybe at 22, no, I didn't even know that my worthiness was a non-negotiable. I didn't even know what shame was. But I later discovered that's what I was living with, this immobilizing shame.
Sure. Well, there was pain, and pain can cloud things for us, blurry things for us, even completely darken, the sun rays for us. So I get it. I absolutely get it. And I want to tell our listeners that we're not here trying to put a judgment on Islam or Islamic teachings. Any family that probably follows or interprets certain practices in a very rigid and imposing way might create a situation similar to yours. So this is not just about Islam or even about religion. It's really about rigidity and fear that if we don't follow such interpretation, something terrible might happen. I want to take us to the period in which you were estranged early on at 22 for those 2.5 years, what you called your first estrangement. Take us into your mind and heart, if you can. Did you think about it? Did you just block it out and live your life? Did it, tell us how it affected you. What emotions came up for you? What thoughts, what stories you told yourself during that first estrangement? And please take your time. And if it's difficult, we can skip that question.
Yeah, that was a tough time. I did not just go about my life and my business. I was probably at the height of my depression during that season. I had graduated from college, undergrad. It took me 5 years. So I changed my major. And it was that natural time for me to start exploring what happens outside of my parents' home. But there was a lot of resistance from my parents to help me to be more independent. And so there was a lot of fighting between my mom and dad and I remember I just started coming home a little bit later and later. And one time I came home and they were both awake waiting for me. And I remember just yelling at my mom to get a life. Like, I was 22. And I remember screaming, get your own life instead of obsessing over mine. And my dad just like slammed down his hand on the coffee table and was like, "You're out." And so several friends came over to help me move out. And it was like my mom screaming at my friends and me the whole time, and packing up. And, some of them had rented a van in order to get me out. My dad was like, "You can't take your car, you can't take your furniture, you just take your..." So I took my things, and my dad had said something like, I was dead to him. And I remember that night, I just wailing. My mom had left me a voice message, and all it said over and over again was, "Read the Quran. Read the Quran, read the Quran." And I do remember just in the grief of it, the grief of this natural stage of my life for me to move out of their home and to move on to the next season of my adulthood came with so much pain. And I would remember thinking about how friends of mine had moved into the dorms, and it's such a rite of passage for that season, and I was 5 years past that. I had wanted to live in the dorm. I wanted to be an RA. I could really see myself doing that. But I wasn't allowed. And my brother, of course, went away out of state to college. And we had this whole dynamic of, he's a boy, I'm a girl. He's the oldest, I'm the youngest. And so there was a lot of resentment on my part at the time and about that too. But I just remember feeling like so alone, so misunderstood, so caught between these two worlds. And so what ended up happening is I was dating a non-Muslim guy, and I ended up becoming really a pseudo member of his family. His parents celebrated holidays, brought me around, and he and I dated, and I ended up my parents didn't speak to me for 2.5 years. And then somehow my mom realized in that season, I had graduated from the University of Arizona, but I also, my undergrad degree was in English, but I was also very involved in the music school, and I sang, and was president of the undergraduate choir, and, I did a lot of stuff. I was very involved on campus. And so a friend had come back from out of state and had started a vocal jazz program and said, "I want you to be the first student on scholarship. You should come and you can work for me." And I remember doing that and feeling like, okay, I'm at home. This is something familiar. I've lost everything familiar. This is something familiar. This is something that brings me confidence. But I was so depressed and didn't really have even the language for the level of depression that I wasn't able to complete that program and get that second bachelor's degree. But I guess my mom had left a voicemail. On the voicemail, she tracked me down to that music school, called the front office, found my office, called me, left a voice message, and said, "I want you and your significant other to come over to our house for a reconciliation meeting with your dad." And we did.
Great.
And another Egyptian Muslim family was there, people who like practically raised me. And my dad demanded that he and I were married and that he convert.
Good.
And so the only way I was, welcome back into my parents' life or my father's life was
Conditional.
Yeah. And so he actually did. He felt like he should, and that it would be the right thing, and it was the only way to to reconcile, and he did convert, and we did get married. And it was a very short-lived marriage. It was very contentious between him and my father, and it was a pretty ugly ending. But I think what ended up happening that I recognize is that without the compass of the certainty of living through my own values, what I know to be true, I was lost in just people pleasing and trying to meet the demands and also the pain of being estranged for 2.5 years. I gained quite a lot of weight in that season. It was just a really challenging time in knowing what is true and who I am, because then I got that temporary relief of being accepted again. And here I am as a hero because I brought a convert.
Sure. Yes. Well, I don't want to gloss over the trauma that you shared, and I appreciate you feeling comfortable enough in the setting to share it. You mentioned grief. I mean, there's anger, there's longing, there's the shame that you experience. There's wanting to stay connected, and then there is the reality that you're out of the family circle, and you came to it under some, difficult circumstances. And I know your story is rich with conflict and resolution. So I'd like to go to the next phase, Act 2, let's call it for now, your second part of the story. And again, for context, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the latter part, when you were estranged again, and you ended up going back to Egypt when your father was ill to reconcile. Might you, in a brief way, kind of explain that second phase? And to me, it's not just the story as it unfolded that matters as much as what happened to Mona, what insights Mona had, what transformation Mona experienced, a bit more about Mona's healing journey and how it might have affected those around you.
Sure. Once that season was over with that first husband, I was seeking love again, and I found it with an Egyptian Muslim man who is the father of my 2 children. And my parents really loved him, and they loved him as the father of their grandchildren. And that marriage didn't work out, and my parents, especially my father, were just so mad at me for that marriage not working out. And so there was a lot of trying to dakhal, like trying to enter into our relationship, like no boundaries. Interference.
Yeah.
Appointing themselves as like the ones to fix the relationship. And again, not trusting my own internal wisdom that maybe that marriage was the catalyst for it was to right the wrong, which my father had said. You're correcting the mistake you made marrying outside of your faith by marrying somebody in your faith. And my parents also just didn't approve of my brother marrying a Jewish woman. So they have a set of grandchildren who are Muslim, my 2, and a set of grandchildren who are Jewish, my brother's children. And usually it was just not discussed that they had Jewish grandchildren. No one ever discussed it or made it explicit. But it sort of became explicit maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. So when that marriage didn't work out with my children's father, I was single for a while, and then I remarried again now a 3rd time. And the 3rd husband is pretty Christian. And that was just totally unacceptable to my parents. So not only was it compounded with their disappointment that I was divorced, but in like 7-8 years divorced, it was that I remarried somebody who, even though he's a man of faith, he's not of their religion. And
even though he follows a book that was on your bookshelf.
Right. Yeah. And so I have a hunch, Tawfiq, that my father probably suffers from borderline personality disorder, and that a lot of the challenges we had with him over the years were a lot of black and white thinking, a lot of vilifying one person, someone else as a hero. Most of his stories kind of have someone who's the hero, someone who's the villain. And so right before a year ago, last July of 2024, they decided to move back to Egypt after 55 years living in the United States.
And at that time, you were estranged from them, or not?
Well, I'd married the year before in July of 2023, and they did not attend the wedding, and they were mad at my brother for attending the wedding. And the year prior to that, or maybe even earlier that same year, my family and I attended my niece's bar mitzvah, and my parents didn't even know there was a bar mitzvah. And so as my parents started to realize that I was just making my own decisions, my father was pretty just done with me and tried to find different ways to, control, and couldn't get the control, and so would vilify me and stop talking again for another period of estrangement. But he also was mad at my brother for attending my wedding. And when my brother came out here from out of state, my parents lived close by to me, to attend my wedding. He wanted to take his children by to see their grandparents. They used to live in the same state. And my father refused to see them because of their participating in my wedding. So that we were all estranged. But then right before they moved a year ago, my dad reached out to tell me we're moving. Kind of. I mean, I had already heard it from a cousin or two, but it was like he pulled me back in order to then abandon, is part of like what gives him that little bit of extra supply for whatever would feed him and his ego. So when he decided to move, my mom didn't want to move. And when he decided before he moved, my brother was going to come say goodbye to my parents, and reached out and said, I want to come say goodbye to you. I hear you're moving to Egypt. And my dad said, I don't want to see you or your wife or your children. And when I stopped by in trying to reconcile and asked my parents, I asked my dad, why won't you see my brother and his kids? The answer was because they're Jewish. And you have to recognize this is like post October 7th. And so apparently something in him just started to snap after October 7th. And he started turning on the news and seeing just this massacre of the Palestinian people. And so his us versus them vilifying, he couldn't sort it in his relationships and vilified his own family members. And I think it had to do with old age. I think it had to do with mental illness. I think it had to do with estrangement for him and how that estrangement impacted him since we'd been estranged for a while. And so they ended up, once my father said he didn't want to see my niece and nephew, I didn't really want to see him either. I didn't really want him to be exposed around my kids. And I just made peace with them leaving without saying really a formal goodbye. Even though my mother did want to see us all and did want to see her grandkids, all 4 of them. She didn't care. My dad, when I said, hey, your wife wants to see her grandkids, he said, but she won't. You know why? Because she's a Middle Eastern wife and she will listen to her husband. And so there's just this theme of obedience and, patriarchy and the woman listening to the man and following this set of rigid rules that when you said earlier, we're not faulting Islam in this conversation, we are not. Because I've come to understand Islam through a whole other lens, and it is not the lens of all of this that I was raised in. So there's this book by A. Helwa, and it's here, can't remember the title of it. You look on my bookshelf here. It's called Secrets of Divine Love. And it allows us to reconsider Islam all through the lens of compassion. And I love it. It's a beautiful book. And it just helps me to understand. Lots of my experiences have helped me to understand that we don't need to judge religion by the faults of the humans who are trying to practice it the best that they can through their humanity, through the parts of them that are, hurt. They're trying to secure their salvation through their hurt. And that's what the truth that I ultimately came to was my dad could not reconcile his own salvation through the behaviors of his children. So he felt like he had to abandon his children and grandchildren in order to secure his salvation. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of compassion that he held that belief, because I think that belief harmed him from having healthy relationships with his own family members.
Sure. And, it's sad because it's also perhaps a missing opportunity to interpret Islam differently, because, when you summon the name of God, the name of Allah is most merciful and compassionate, right?
Yeah,
and that opening statement, right? And the idea is we're gonna emulate God's mercy and compassion in our own behavior with others.
Yes.
People miss that somehow, and the rigidity of beliefs and the cultural influence, like you said earlier, get in the way.
And I actually gave my father a copy of that book for his birthday on June 25th, the year he left last year. The 24th, we were trying to reconcile, and I thought, let me help him to understand that I haven't thrown away Islam. I just have my own interpretation of it. And I remember telling him in one of our, heated conversations when he was telling me how I had fallen short. And I said, I have a worldview that allows me to synthesize, my experiences as an American and my experiences as a child of Egyptian immigrants. And I said, Dihai, that's my right to see the world through that lens, because you're the ones who came to this country and put me in a place where I was socialized here too. It's my right to see it through that lens. And I think over the years, as I started doing some major shame resilience work, I started to be able to claim my own interpretation of things with confidence, with clarity, and extend compassion to people who had caused me quite a lot of pain and harm for the tools they hadn't developed as parents or as people.
Good for you. I applaud you, Manan, for the compassion you were able to, bring into your life and offer that to your parents. Before you tell me the rest of the story, because there's a lot to focus on as well, I just want to mention the book by Martha Sweezy on shame. If you haven't seen it, that's a book worthy of your attention, in which she unpacks shame through the lens of internal family systems. It's something that is valuable, since you've been trained in that model as well, and you use it as a paradigm. So I learned from you're telling me the story previously that you learned that your father got ill when he was in Egypt. How did that unfold, and how did that situation change the path of your journey?
So yeah, they left in July of 24, and then for some reason I was boarding a plane in November of last year, going out of state to do some work, and I had this intuition that I just needed to check on my parents, even though they had left without us speaking under some pretty terrible terms. I just reached out to a few cousins, sent them a message, and said, "I'm wondering how my parents' transition to Egypt went. Can you give me an update on them?" And the 3 cousins who wrote back said, "Your parents are in really bad health. Your father probably has a very short amount of time to live." And so when I came back from the out-of-town trip where I had to just do like a 3-day thing. I just came right home, got my passport, and went straight to Egypt. And I got to Cairo, and I first checked on my mom. My father was in a heart hospital, and his heart was failing. And my mom had, during that time he was in the hospital, had fallen and had a brain injury. And so she wasn't very well aware of her surroundings. She was confusing people. We also knew she had a little bit of like early onset dementia before they moved. And I think it was exasperated by the brain injury. So I stayed with her. My first day in Cairo was the 22nd. Stayed with her all day. And then I was getting ready to go see my father at 5 p.m. the next day, the 23rd of November. And I arrived to the hospital at 5 o'clock, and he had passed away at 4 o'clock. So initially, I was shaming myself for, how could I have been here a whole day and I didn't see him? But my path to a lot of my shame work comes through the Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families 12-step program, ACA. And the art of surrender is one that program really taught me, just how to let go and trust the universe and trust God and trust my higher power, that it's unfolding exactly as it was like divinely designed to. And so I was able to soothe the part of me that felt shame with the wisdom of, if I was supposed to be here to see him transition, it would have been. And what was supposed to happen was happening. And so I was able to self-soothe a little bit. A cousin also said to me, he was talking so horribly about you before you died. Maybe you were being protected from having to hear him speak to you. And so I was given these moments with my father just in the first hour of his death. I had this time with him. When the last thing I said to him was unkind, and I had yelled at him for abandoning my niece and nephew and my kids, and I was able to just be with him and say, I love you, I forgive you, I hope you can forgive me, I have so much compassion for you, I really hope you can get some rest now. And I had the opportunity to play recorded words from all 4 grandchildren to him in his ear in the hospital, right in the morgue of there. And then, excuse me, the next morning I got up and I went to the embassy and I got to put my name on the permission to bury him in Cairo. And we buried him outside of Cairo in his village he grew up in, and he got to be buried with his brother and his mom and his dad. And so I got to be in the Salat al-Ghanaza, which is like the prayer for the dead in the mosque. And I got to be at the gravesite, and I got to listen to Quran in both places, which brought me tremendous comfort. And I felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. That's the epitome of grace, what you're sharing with us. You forgave him. Have you come to forgive yourself from having whatever experiences you've experienced? Was there a need for you to do that as well? And since he wasn't able to physically hear you or give you a nod or forgive you in return, were you able to, not that you did anything wrong, right? But to kind of reconcile, to build that bridge. Could you just talk me through this a little bit? Because it's a very powerful experience you had. I'd love to get into your mind a little bit and your heart to share with the listeners what went through you when you were reconciling with the person who couldn't respond. And maybe his spirit was there. I don't know. I think he responded in different ways.
I have absolutely been able to forgive myself. And I think my reactions to him, I understand where they come from. When I have a part that doesn't feel safe or protected, that part of me is trying to keep me safe and protected, or if I'm triggered by something. And so I honor the fact that I'm fallible and that I don't always handle each moment in a way that I'm proud of. But I know that the parts of me, the way they react, I know there's meaning there. And so I just try to listen to that and stay connected to that. But I think my mom not knowing that he died, and I went to go bury him with cousins and came back, and she said, "Where were you all day?" And I said, "Kanandi shwet mashawir." I had some errands to run. And that was so heartbreaking. But what I discovered in those days was not just the ability to forgive my father and let go of some of the pain I'd been holding towards him, but that I found compassion for my mother, which was a lot harder for me to find because she was my primary abuser. But over the years, I've come to see that she was reacting to him and taking it out on me, and just how little agency she's really had in her life. And I think just being with her in Egypt in November, I had to come back. And then I came back in December to move her into some sort of like an assisted living for something for more sustainable care. Because my parents were so vulnerable and elderly, and people were robbing them. And once I recognized the severity of how vulnerable she was, I was kind of really wanted to pivot and get her into someplace secure. And just being able to foster that relationship too, and just see how different our family dynamic is now. All of those things have been very helpful without vilifying my father. I think because I'm so curious, I wanted to understand this is not healthy. This is not normal. This is beyond. Many people would think it was my culture or my religion that was informing my parents' behavior. Then I started seeing mentally healthy people who were from my culture and religion who didn't behave the way my parents did. And I started to learn a deeper truth of it, about the mental illness piece here. And so I think being able to forgive myself for how I reacted to them has been very helpful with the help of that 12-step program, just understanding, doing my 12 steps, doing my workbook, doing my exercises, going to meetings, in conjunction with having psychotherapy. I'll tell you, after my father died on the 23rd, I decided to bring my former mother-in-law back with me. I was very close with her in spite of the divorce. She and I, she's very close, and we remained besties. And I told her, "Will you come back with me? I need you." And she said, "I need you too." And she came back with me, and she actually passed away on the flight home from Cairo on the 26th of November. She had a stroke. And the universe designed it so I could be right next to her in the moment. And I think the juxtaposition, 3 days apart, this woman who absolutely mothered me the way I needed to be mothered in my life, whose biggest fear was dying alone. The plan was for her not to die alone, and for me to be right by her side and comfort her with words of love and comfort. And I was able to do the same for my father, even though I wasn't there during his transition. I was there right after. And I was able to say a lot of really loving things to him too. But to be able to tell her just speak love to her in her transition, gave me the experience of being with a parent during that transition. And the way shame likes to creep up, it's like, "Oh, it's your fault. She died. You should have taken better care of her." And then I realized I'm not in charge of any of these things.
Yeah, you're not responsible for. You're responsible too, perhaps, but not for. Yeah, as someone once reminded me, as I was navigating my care for my parents, you just shared very, very difficult story of very difficult losses, Mona. my sympathy on all fronts.
Thank you.
It matters not how ill a loved one is, or how strained the relationship is. Loss is loss, and sometimes we have to navigate the aftermath on our own and kind of rebuild the story and come to the healing process. So I know this has been challenging for you. And, part of differentiating, and you have differentiated, and part of getting in touch with our deep core wisdom is perhaps to realize that we do not need others' validation or approval to feel whole. It's easy to say, hard to do, but it sounds to me that you got there. And I'd love for you to tell us more about how you reached that place beyond what you shared already. It's like I'm looking at you and I refer to the state as a bridge between compassionate detachment and passionate engagement. You were in it, but you stayed away from it, that you didn't take responsibility for it in some fashion. That's how you're able to elevate. So maybe share a bit more about that healing journey itself for the sake of our listeners.
There's an awareness that happened in me at some point that I have a people-pleasing part that wanted to get that validation. In fact, I used to say my love language is words of affirmation. Used to be very highly dependent upon praise. And then I read this passage. I would love to read it if I could. Could I read this little passage?
Please.
It's pretty short. Let me pull it. I read this passage in this book during my healing work. And it talks about powerlessness. When alcoholic or other dysfunction is present in the family, every member of the family is affected. We are affected in body, mind, and spirit. Through the first 18 years of our lives, our families had 6,570 days to shame, belittle, ignore, criticize, or manipulate us during the most formative years of our being. That is 160,000 hours of living in dysfunction with unhealthy parenting. That is 72 seasons of sorrow stored deeply in the tissue of our bodies. The dysfunction is encoded into our souls as the false self. To survive this long exposure to family dysfunction, our minds developed deeply entrenched roles and traits that changed the meaning of words and experiences. And some of us misremembered the damaging nature of the abuse because we depended upon our abusers for food and shelter. And as children, we did not have the option to leave our homes. And I think what's powerful about that is we developed stories that minimized our parents' behavior, or which convinced us that we were wrong and deserved the harmful behavior. But in reality, I think what healing has done for me is helping me understand that the behavior itself was harmful. So if I'm trying to get affirmation from someone who's operating through a sense of rules that are unhealthy and harmful to my very being, then maybe the best form of resistance is to reconsider the rules. And the rigidity from which those rules come from is part and evidence of their own hurt. So then I can start to have more flexible thinking and then become in service of self-compassion, compassion towards them. It shifts everything. Just the awareness that I am not bad. Like when I told you asked me what feelings do I have, I had shame and I didn't even know what that was, because it was my normal baseline feeling. But once I started to unpack that over all these years, then I'm able to self-soothe. I'm able to have the self-talk to say, you are enough, you are worthy, you are deserving, you are not bad, and just having those things in my mind to calm me then becomes, I don't want to fall into that mindset that if I'm not bad, then they're bad. What if
Right.
I take the ego out of it to get all together? I don't compare myself and say any one of us is better or worse than. We're just doing our best with the experiences we have and the level of understanding we have, the stories we're telling ourselves.
Beautifully said. Yes, because we are our biographies. I mean, our behavior reflect these biographies, and we sometimes lose touch of that. And it's very challenging to be the adult as a child in the relationship with a parent. The parent is supposed to be the adult. So the parent is supposed to tell you you're worthy, you have a good core. There are some issues we need to work on, or behavior is this and that, but you as a human being are inherently good, right? And when we don't hear that, when we hear the exact opposite day after day after day after day, as children, we have to protect ourselves, and we develop these, I guess, protective armor, right? This protective armor that makes sure this doesn't happen to us again.
Right.
And sometimes we have to break that relationship, right? I mean, it's difficult to sustain some form of belonging to family or culture without losing ourselves to compliance and conformity. It's like it's a difficult balance to maintain, and a child or a teenager or a young adult can easily struggle with that. And it seems to me maybe one of the solutions is to keep the door open. It's like, take a stand for you, like you have, but maintain that open door, so that when the adult comes to his or her senses, they can walk through that door, and you can find the way to reconciliation.
Yeah,
What would you? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think you're absolutely right about keeping the door open. I identify really, when I think about my stance, I identify as a bridger. And I think of myself as someone who, in my life, I was divinely designed with this deep understanding of what it means to not belong. I didn't fully belong in my family. Sometimes I didn't feel like I fully belonged in my friend group because of my different background or whatever. And so the uniqueness of my experience made me feel like an outsider. Okay, but really my experience is so human. A lot of people feel like outsiders. A lot of people don't feel like they belong. But I feel like that those experiences built this desire, these curiosities of, well, how can I help people to connect better? And really, when I think about it, what I was experiencing with my parents was a kind of relationship. With my mom, it was very codependent. She wanted to fix me. She wanted to change me. She wanted to rescue me from myself, to save me so I could go to heaven. My dad, there was a lot of desire to control. It's more counter-dependent, a lot of bullying, a lot of abuse. And so in turn, I might become very independent and go separate from them. Or, as they would hope, I'd become dependent, so that way they could fix me or bully me into submission. But what I've found in my life is that the healthiest relationships are interdependent, where I can be my full truth self, and you can too, and we know how to more than coexist. You make me better, I make you better, because we support each other in healthy ways. So I've taken this healing and been able to apply it not just to my personal life, but I work in schools, and schools are about relationships between teachers and students, or teachers and teachers, or parents. And I like to support people with building healthier, more authentic, interdependent relationships.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, in closing, I'm wondering if there is something more you would share with the listener who's struggling with the family situation because of some chasmic differences around religion, or politics, or identity, or other personal choices. And as you share that with the listener, maybe think about your own younger self. and what you might tell her, having experienced what she has experienced and the trauma that has colored a big segment of her life.
Sure. I would say that you are enough. You are worthy. You are designed as you're supposed to be. And that the worldview of those who have a different worldview, it's theirs. And you can't change it. You can't fix it. And so I think that serenity prayer of God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that one is me, is that the change that you can be responsible for is to not own their shame as your identity, that your worthiness is a non-negotiable, that you are enough, that your enoughness does not stand on the other side of their validation or their affirmation or pleasing them.
Thank you, Mona. Extremely inspiring words to bring to near end, because I'm going to give you the final word in a moment. This very engaging, deeply moving conversations. And I have to tell you, you took us on a journey from the deeply personal to the possibly universal. And I have to add that I did feel a lot of your grief, sadness, but I also felt a lot of your hope and wisdom and the capacity to heal and your determination to stay in the game and get through it as whole or wholesome as you possibly can. These family challenges you've experienced aren't unique, but they're unique to you. And this is your story. You're able to find safe shelter, but not after some trials and tribulations. And your experience, painful though it might have been, really gives me confidence that we each may have what it takes to navigate difficult challenges of the sort. We might not get all that we desire, yet I trust that we can often find meaningful compromises to bridge widening divisions within family. And someone has to take that first step. In your case, you took some first steps and your mom took some other first steps, but you stayed in it. So I invite all our listeners to explore the areas of critical misalignment between our core views and preferences and our family's culture or traditions, or where we seem to be at serious odds, especially when the family culture or traditions impose upon us certain behavior, certain way that goes against our grain. That's when we know from our deepest truth that there's something not right in this picture. So I hope that all of us could strive to find balance between giving credence to such traditions without surrendering our own truth. And may we pursue such balance, but only if it's safe for us to do so. Safety, personal safety is very important in these situations. And I think there's fulfillment in the process that you went through, it seems to me, and some form of peace of mind that you were able to find around the corner. So I applaud your courage to share the story with us. And I'd like to give you the last word, Mona. What gives you hope and resilience at this moment?
Mona in Arabic means hope. I'm sure you know that. I'm full of a lot of hope because whenever I am able to center my relationship with my higher power, I think spiritual abuse can make us lost with not having the connection with God or whatever higher power we were taught. And I had a period of my life where I was very disconnected. And now many of my decisions, many of my hardships come from leaning into what does my higher power want for me in my life, and where can I be led because I listen to that intuitively. And I think, I'm also a breast cancer survivor. And during the season in which I had breast cancer, I had moments of fear and I had moments of anxiety, but I kept being able to find my calm because I would just trust Allah. I would trust my higher power. And what's powerful about revolutionizing my relationship with my higher power has been able to share some of that with my parents, who also didn't cope well when we were, back on again, off again, we were on. And when I was sick, and my being able to give them some peace of mind with all the anxiety they felt about my cancer, because I was trusting my higher power, and I was able to have gratitude, and I was able, absolutely not a spiritual bypass, but a spiritual grounding in, I think, a lot of those self-energy to me from in the IFS language and world, those 8 C's of calm and curious and compassionate and connected and clear. Those words to me are the embodiment of my higher power. And when I don't see that in another, I don't judge them for it. I'm not critical of them for being that way. I am curious as to what harm has been caused them to have them disconnected from their higher power right now. And the being able to be connected to the higher power, to me, is so much more profound than following dogmatic rules for me in how I worship and connect. And so where I think anyone else who's suffering from some challenges with regards to interfaith or challenging relationships with family due to religion is learning how to cultivate those in ourselves. It isn't that those things are hard to access. It's just that those things, they're there. It's just sometimes other things block us from being able to embody it and to allow it to flow through us. And that's been the work for me, is I understand the family legacy is absolutely compassion, and not the family dysfunctions that have been passed on, but being able to give compassion to myself, give compassion to people even who haven't learned how to give it to themselves, and understand that if they haven't been able to access it, they probably, there was probably a lot of suffering there too.
Mona, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tawfiq.
Blessings.
Thanks for listening. Facing the Moment is an independent production of the Foundation for Self-Leadership, a nonprofit committed to bringing emotional, relational, and societal healing and well-being to a world in need. Learn more at foundationifs.org. You can download this and all other episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Until the next episode, may we all keep facing the moment with grit and grace.